What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another Box and One discussion. Today's going to be a shorter one, but it's a genuine question that I think everybody has been asking ever since we saw the NBA Emirates Cup for the third year. First year, we had the Lakers win it against the Pacers. Second year, we had the Bucks win it against the Thunder. Third year, we have the Knicks winning it against the San Antonio Spurs. My question for y'all, and I'm going to start with you, Chad. Does this thing actually matter?
The easy answer, and this the unpopular one, it really does not matter. You see, and I said this when we first started the NBA Cup, it can matter if, let's say, there's a reward, like, if you win the cup, you get a tax break on the apron or you get extra money. Then it matters in a sense because the future of your team can depend on you winning it. But the fact is, players get an extra $500,000 and a little piston cup. It doesn't matter. And it also doesn't matter in the aspect of it doesn't really tell you who's a legit contender for the NBA Finals and who doesn't. If you look at the last two at least NBA Cup champions, the Lakers and the Bucks, both of them, the following playoffs, they were out in the first round, both in 5 games, unironically. And the team that lost the NBA Cup, Pacers that year, they lost to the Eastern Conference Finals. Thunder would end up winning the whole thing. So in terms of who wins the NBA Cup, as if in terms of if they're a legit contender, doesn't really matter at all. I feel like this was a whole thing. It was stolen from the soccer community in Europe in terms of we're going to try to emulate it to get views to compete with the NFL. But the truth is no one really cares about it. And I wouldn't say it's a waste of time because I guess in the aspect of it's fun just to have. But in terms of if this is if it's you're gonna use the NBA Cup or that little tournament to decide who's a champion and who's not, you really can't because it really doesn't tell you much. Example, the Hawks last year, they went I think in the semifinals and they lost to the Knicks. Hawks were not even a playoff team. They were out in the play-in. And that's just a perfect representation of how the cup is. And in my opinion, if the cup is to stay, because I think the cup should be gone, but if you want to keep it, if you want to make it somewhat matter in at all, aside from hey, we got this little trophy, I think if you do the cup, right? You do the cup and let's say the top 2 teams, right? Top 2 teams, maybe you get an extra 20 or 30 million out of the apron to great flexibility for, team building. If you're going to keep the apron rule, that is, assuming that they don't get rid of it. And then the winner, you maybe can go into a third apron. And that gives people motivation not only to watch it, right? But also the teams that actually kind of care and really try to compete. Because if you win the cup, it's you can have a good team in the future. Or you can maybe keep a squad together. Like the Thunder, perfect example of someone that's probably going to get screwed over by the apron rule. Unless it's changed. But let's say they win the NBA Cup. Now it's we can keep our squad together for an extra year and not be penalized. But that's kind of my thoughts on the NBA Cup. In terms of trying to gauge teams, doesn't matter. And it really doesn't even matter for views because, no one cares. But if you want to try to at least fix viewership and make it relevant, I feel like it should be a necessary change in terms of the reward for winning.
How you feeling, Royce?
Yeah, I would say it matters, but it also doesn't matter. Mainly, it matters for the players. Even if you're making $40 million a year, an extra $500,000, I can't remember who was saying it was Bobby Portis or whatever, that could go towards him getting his mom a new house or fixing up her house and this and that. So I think it only really matters for the bottom of the bench or the guys who are on $700,000. If you're making $500,000 off one game, that's your entire salary you're making in one night. But I do think the NBA Cup is a good addition. I don't think it changes, Chad was mentioning. It doesn't determine who's going to be in the NBA Finals. Are the Spurs and Thunder going to be in the Western Conference Finals? Maybe, maybe not. It doesn't give you a tell of what's going to happen. And people aren't going to look back in 20 years oh, Jalen Brunson is an NBA Cup MVP. He should be in the Hall of Fame because of this, right? It's not going to swing any opinions or anything that actually really matters. But I do think it's a good thing for young players to sort of play in games that matter without necessarily having to go to the playoffs. They talked about it at the Spurs. I watched an interview with Devin Vassell and he was I don't know what it's like to go to the playoffs, but this kind of ups the stakes. like it feels like a playoff game. And then also on the broadcast, they were talking about this is the one game in the entire season that's not a playoff game where the whole entire league is watching you. This is a chance for guys like Dylan Harper. If you haven't watched Dylan Harper play, you haven't watched Stephon Castle play, you haven't watched Devin Vassell play, this is a chance for, sort of casual fans or even NBA players in general, like who don't get a chance to, if you're on the East Coast, you probably don't stay up to watch games at 1 a.m. to watch the Spurs play or whatever. So I think it's a good way to like, put a spotlight on some teams that wouldn't necessarily get it. But I've enjoyed the NBA Cup. I wouldn't say like I would take it away or that it's like changed anything drastically. But I do think it's a good incentive for, the players to play a little harder. And then also about the whole incentivizing it, I really don't know how you make like a realistic thing that could actually work, because like giving teams extra money, it's like for 1 year, is it really going to make a difference? Like you let them get a tax break or whatever, or people were saying like give them a free playoff spot. I think that's a little too far, but yeah, I don't necessarily see it. And then the whole like soccer thing, it's that they stole the idea but they haven't implemented it as well, because just for context sake, if you do win the cup in soccer, you get like a free pass to one of the next competitions, which doesn't exist in the NBA. So I think maybe if you like, I don't know, bring in some European teams, bring in some teams from Australia, maybe that could like up the incentive or, put a little more stakes on it. I think that would be really cool. Like how they do in preseason, like bring whoever wins the Euro Cup or whoever wins Euro League or whoever wins the Australian League, and then like pick a teams in the NBA to play on. But yeah, to like incentivize it, I don't think there's anything more you can do other than, give a few $100,000.
Yeah, I think going off of what Roy said, I would definitely say that, it gives fans, the biggest complaint about the NBA, like for a while has been, regular season basketball doesn't matter until like post All-Star break. That's when people really start watching the regular season. Outside of the holidays, obviously, I do think the NBA Cup gives people a chance to give something. It gives the fans a chance, something to get excited for. I think, going off of what Chad said, nobody, it's came and it's went. Nobody's representing them. It's like, oh yeah, they just won the NBA Cup. It doesn't really have a prolonged or lasting impact on the league, but I do think that, it's the NBA trying to come up with something that makes pre-All-Star break basketball exciting. I like, the Thunder and Spurs game, I think was the best game of, the entire tournament. I think maybe the weaker part about it is the group stages, like when they like break them off into groups and they have the group stage and they're like, okay, this is NBA Cup night, and we're just kind of like, oh, okay, it's already here, like the actual group stages themselves and the way they're kind of broken down. It's not like a 32 team or, 30 team tournament, like it's matchups and brackets and they're going against each other. The groups thing is a little weird because it's like, oh, you've got this group, the winner of this group in Group A and Group B, now they're going to play, maybe just fix the format, maybe just make it like a straight up tournament, right? Just, you got the highest seed, you got the lowest seed. They're just going at each other. In terms of incentivizing, one thing I was thinking, and it really depends on, the teams, maybe if it's like for certain team, maybe like the top 4, maybe top 8 teams, maybe because depending on those teams, if they are in the playoff position, sometimes rankings can be close. Maybe it's an automatic tiebreaker if you do get to a certain point in the NBA Cup. You're the 4th seed, you're tied, you're like, 47 and 35, and another team is 47 and 35. Well, now you have the tiebreaker, and from there, that can incentivize you to get to a certain standard in the NBA Cup as well.
I think I do actually like the whole tiebreaker idea. I think if there's a way to, say that it does matter, because then at the end of the day, if you are tied with a team, like to go into like a playoff spot or a play-in spot, and then you say, oh, but I won the NBA Cup, that kind of does put like an emphasis on it that for it to actually matter.
Yeah, in that aspect, I guess it does make sense. See, I said apron because I feel like the apron is screwing a lot of good teams over. And I feel like the cup is like a perfect opportunity to like, not a loophole, but in a sense, like give people a break and, make it have more importance. But in terms of tiebreaker, it'll kind of be like, in the NFL where you win your division and, division winners get priority. That is also not a bad idea. It's just my biggest thing about the cup is you gotta make it important because like the whole thing with viewership is when you have like big games, the games have to have like weight to them for the future. Like in terms like you're just playing for a cup, but the cup is not a championship. Like in that aspect, it's not really like, it doesn't motivate people to go watch. I mean, it's fun hoops. It's like, a little side mission to go do, but it's not like, oh, like this is must-see TV. It's just kind of like, it's just, the NBA Cup. And that's kind of just been the appeal because, again, the whole purpose of the cup or that idea is to compete with viewership and try to, like, make that early stages of basketball more interesting. In my opinion, like, it's actually not a really bad idea. The cup should, like, if you win the cup or like top 2 or something, it should be like a tiebreaker, and you could use it in like the later, or at least not a playoff run, but the NBA Cup winner or like the top 2, because it's East and West. In my opinion, if let's say the Hawks, right? Or not, let's say, no, not the Hawks. They didn't win. Bucks and Thunder. But let's say the Thunder, right? Instead of the championship team, let's say they were a 10 seed, right? They're fighting for a play-in spot, and the same thing with the Bucks. I feel like if you win the cup, you should be locked into a play-in, not a playoff, but a play-in spot, or at least have home court. I feel like if you do that, that would be a little better, because you're not rewarding them by having them go to the playoffs, because we've seen it to where NBA Cup champions or like the final 2, they have a fall off and they don't do as good. But at the same time, you giving them a chance to, maybe get into the playoffs. Because not a playoff spot, it's not like a 6 seed. It's like one of those lower seeds, and you got to go do your playing games. Or at least home court for a playing game if they find themselves in the position. But it's just, I don't know, it's just the complexity of trying to make the game more relevant, because it runs into the thing about the NBA Cup. Like, it runs into that gap. Not all the games, because, the game was, if I'm not mistaken, it was played on a Tuesday, right? The NBA Cup. So it's like the NBA Cup itself, it doesn't, like, conflict with the NFL. It's kind of like what we talked about with the WNBA in terms of, like, scheduling your games to where, like, you can maximize your viewership. But in terms of, like, the journey to the NBA Cup, you schedule it in between the height of college football, that little playoff run, and the NFL. And amongst us, we don't really care too much about college football, but statistically speaking, a lot of America does. And like, that's where all the viewership, that's where it's going. So when you're creating like side events like this, you have to like have it a level of importance to where it's like, okay, it's actually a kind of a big deal because it could affect how the season plays out. I got to go sit down and watch it. It's like incentive to give you your time, in a sense, to go view something. And I feel like if you can change the reward for the NBA Cup, I feel like you can really do a better job at it. Because it's good for the young guys, right? It's good for like, the young guys to play and get playoff experience without being in the playoffs. But the way I've been looking at least the past 3, most of the teams that made it, aside from the Spurs in the latest one, they've been to the playoffs. Pacers, were a playoff experience team. They were like, yeah, we tasted it before. Lakers, the one team that won, they were relatively seasoned in the playoffs. Following year, Bucks and Thunder. Thunder, even the year before that, they lost the cup. They went to the playoffs and lost to the Mavs. So it's not like they didn't have playoff experience. And it's also like, you see, if they let the bench guys play it out, like let's say, all your bench players played over your starters, I can get to where like, it's more motivating because these guys are actually playing for extra bread. But it's like they hardly see the floor or get playtime unless injuries. It's still the starters. So it's like, there's ways definitely to at least make it better to where it's more important and people like from all over are going to be wanting to tune in versus just like, NBA Cup, who really cares? That kind of thing.
To be honest, I don't even think you have to go that far. I think just make it on like a primetime slot. Like the semifinal was on a Saturday night and I was like, okay, the final's probably going to be next Saturday. They're like, no, it's on Tuesday. Why are you making the semifinal hold more weight than the actual final? So I think even just make it like a Friday night, make it a Saturday night, make it even like a Sunday, like matinee game, like 3 p.m. or something. But like Tuesday for a game that you want to like have some significance, and then you're like doing it in arguably like the busiest time of year for people as well.
I mean, there are a few ideas. You could make it a New Year's Eve type of thing, a New Year's thing. Like, there's definitely within that November, December slot, there's a lot of, Chad had a great term, maximizing viewership. There's definitely a lot of ways they can maximize their viewership. And I think Rois also had a great point in terms of, bro, it's a Tuesday. Like I was thinking like, oh, okay, it's a Saturday. They're going, next Saturday, that's where the cup go. Oh, no, it's Tuesday at 5:30, so I'm just getting home and I have to edit a journalism package. I'm not sure if I'm thinking about the game is on, but I've got other things to do, so it's just on. I'm not really like intently watching it as much as I could be because I'm a college student. We got other stuff to do. But I do think the biggest thing, obviously, like the incentive thing, that's neither here nor there, but, that's the incentive for the players. For us watching, we just want to watch good basketball. And, some of the time, like I said, Amazon Prime coverage for the most part, NBA has been really good this year. I mean, the Taylor Rooks, Blake Griffin, Steve Nash, Dirk, and Udonis combo is really nice to see. They had John Wall for a couple times as well. Same thing with Peacock with Melo and T-Mac. They've got, a lot of good things going on just in terms of the parity, in terms of who's covered the NBA this season has been really great to watch. But I think, Amazon Prime Hoops on a 5:30 p.m. on a Tuesday, that's like already such a niche time. I was like, why not just start it at 6? 5:30 is kind of odd. But I think they do have extra time allocated to show the walkouts. I know Amazon does, so that might be it. But still, it's a really niche time. And because it's a streaming service, like, you don't have to worry about like another broadcaster like running with other things. So your Amazon, you can like, really iron out that time for a prime time slot outside of Thursday, because I know that's when the NFL takes place. But yeah, you really can maximize that. Thursday night football. Oh, and we got the NBA Cup tomorrow night as well, even if it's a good Thursday night matchup. So you can kind of bounce back on those things as well, even cross promotionally with sports. So yeah, there's definitely, it matters, but doesn't matter at the same time. But it kind of doesn't matter because we all have lives, and a Tuesday is just not, club going up on a Tuesday, not the NBA Cup. But with that being said, though, again, as always, if you enjoyed the content, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Pleasure doing it. This is Roischand and Chat Hayes again. I'm Joachim Powell. For the last time, if you enjoyed the content, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Hit that notification bell and follow the Twitter, the Threads, or the X. Follow the Twitter/X, the Threads, the Instagram, the TikTok, and the YouTube for daily BoxInOne content. And we will see you all in the next one.